Welcome back, ChronoCrew Legends. Today, we're rewriting the story of My Hero Academia with a twist that changes everything. What if Izuku Midoriya wasn't quirkless? What if, at his lowest point, he awakened one of the most unstoppable forces in existence, vector manipulation, a power that can bend reality itself? This is the story of a Deku who doesn't just chase power, he chases the true meaning of heroism, no matter how dangerous his path becomes. So buckle up, Legends, let's ride the timeline together. The wind howled through the empty playground. A boy lay trembling on the ground, bruised, broken, and utterly alone. Katsuki Bakugo's laughter still rang in his ears. Useless Deku. You'll never be a hero. Quirkless freaks like you should just give up. Izuku Midoriya pressed his face against the cold dirt, tasting blood and shame. His All Might backpack lay torn beside him, its contents scattered like broken dreams across the playground. The notebook, his precious hero analysis notebook, had been blown to pieces by Bakugo's explosions, its charred pages dancing in the autumn wind like dying butterflies. Please, Izuku whispered, his voice cracking. I just wanted to help people. Above him, Bakugo cracked his knuckles, small explosions popping between his fingers like firecrackers. The two other boys flanked him, his usual lackeys, eager for violence. Help people, Bakugo sneered, kicking dirt into Izuku's face. You can't even help yourself, Deku. Face it, you're nothing. You'll always be nothing. Izuku's small hands clenched into fists against the ground. Tears mixed with blood as they dripped from his nose. His ribs ached where Bakugo had kicked him. His left eye was already swelling shut. But it wasn't the physical pain that broke him. It was the crushing weight of hopelessness. The suffocating realization that maybe, just maybe, Kakin was right. Maybe he really was useless. Maybe his dreams of becoming a hero like All Might were just the delusions of a pathetic, quirkless boy. You know what? Bakugo's voice turned cold. Dangerous. Maybe I should do everyone a favor and put you out of your misery. Save the world from another useless mouth to feed. Izuku's blood ran cold. He could hear the genuine malice in Bakugo's voice now. This wasn't just bullying anymore. Something in his childhood friend had twisted, darkened. The explosions in Bakugo's palms grew larger, hotter. Kakin, please, don't call me that. Bakugo roared, his quirk flaring. We're not friends. We never were. You're just a pest that won't go away. The explosion came without warning. Izuku rolled desperately to the side, but the blast caught his shoulder, spinning him through the air. He crashed into the metal slide with a sickening thud, his vision blurring. Warm blood trickled down his arm. Oh man, Bakugo, one of the lackeys laughed nervously. You really got him good. Shut up, Bakugo snapped. But there was something unsettled in his voice now. Had he gone too far? The explosion had been bigger than he'd intended, fueled by years of frustration and a twisted sense of superiority. Izuku struggled to push himself up, his arms shaking. Everything hurt. His shoulder felt like it was on fire. But worse than the physical pain was the emotional devastation, the look of genuine hatred in Kakin's eyes. This is it, Izuku thought, despair washing over him like a tide. This is how it ends. Not with me becoming a hero, but dying as a useless, quirkless nobody. But then, in that moment of absolute darkness, something inside him rebelled. No, the thought came quietly at first, barely a whisper in his mind. No, I won't let it end like this. Izuku's eyes slowly opened, focusing on his torn All Might figure lying nearby. The number one hero's painted smile seemed to look right at him, speaking without words. It's fine now. Why? Because I am here. All Might wouldn't give up. Izuku realized, something stirring deep in his chest. He'd find a way. He'd protect people even if it seemed impossible. Look at him, Bakugo laughed harshly. Still trying to get up? Don't you know when to quit, Deku? But Izuku wasn't listening anymore. Something was happening inside him. Something fundamental was shifting. It started as a warm sensation in his chest, then spread outward like ripples on a pond. I don't want to hurt them, Izuku thought as power began to flow through his veins. I don't want revenge. I just want to protect, to stand up, to prove that being a hero isn't about having the strongest quirk, it's about having the strongest heart. The world seemed to slow down around him. Izuku could suddenly feel everything. Every force, every direction, every magnitude of energy in the immediate area. The velocity of falling leaves, the trajectory of dust particles in the wind, the kinetic energy building in Bakugo's palms as he prepared another explosion. And somehow, impossibly, he could change them. Bakugo's eyes widened as he saw Izuku rise to his feet, moving with a fluid grace that seemed to defy gravity itself. There was something different about the green-haired boy now, something that made the air itself feel heavy with potential. What the hell? Bakugo breathed. Izuku looked up, and for the first time in his life, there was no fear in his eyes when he faced Katsuki Bakugo. Instead, there was something far more powerful: determination. "I'm done running, Kaken," Izuku said, voice low but unshaken. "I don't care how strong your quirk is, I won't back down anymore." Bakugo's face twisted with rage. "You think you're hot stuff now? I'll show you what a real quirk can do." He launched himself forward, explosions propelling him like rockets, his right hand drawn back for a devastating blast that could seriously injure or even kill. But Izuku was ready. He didn't dodge. He didn't duck. Instead, he simply reached out, not with his hands, but with his newfound power, and gently redirected the vectors of force around Bakugo's attack. The explosion still came, but instead of striking Izuku, it curved impossibly through the air, dissipating harmlessly into the sky. Bakugo, thrown off balance by the unexpected redirection of his own momentum, tumbled to the ground in shock. "Impossible," one of the lackeys whispered. "How did he?" But Izuku wasn't paying attention to them anymore. He was staring at his own hands in wonder and terror, watching as small objects around him, leaves, pebbles, scraps of paper, began to orbit slowly around his body like he was the center of a gentle gravitational field. "What is this?" he thought, awed and frightened in equal measure. "What am I?" "Freak!" Bakugo screamed, scrambling to his feet. "You're some kind of freak." But there was fear in his voice now, real, genuine fear. And that fear made Izuku's heart sink. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Izuku realized with growing horror. "Power that makes people afraid. Power that sets me apart. I didn't want this. I just wanted to help." The floating debris around him suddenly dropped to the ground as his concentration wavered. Bakugo and his lackeys took the opportunity to flee, running toward the school with terrified backward glances. "This isn't over, Deku," Bakugo shouted, but his voice was shaking. "Whatever weird quirk you're hiding, it doesn't make you a hero. You're still useless." And then they were gone, leaving Izuku alone in the playground with his newly awakened power and a heart full of confusion. He sank to his knees, trembling not from pain but from the weight of what had just happened. The power was still there, humming quietly beneath his skin like a sleeping giant. He could feel it responding to his emotions, ready to lash out at the slightest provocation. "I could have hurt them," he realized with dawning horror. "If I had wanted revenge, if I had been angry instead of just wanting to protect myself, I could have really hurt them." The thought made him sick, but then, like a beacon in the darkness, he remembered All Might's words from a video he'd watched countless times. "A true hero isn't someone who never falls down, it's someone who always gets back up, no matter how many times they're knocked down." Izuku slowly stood up, wiping the blood from his face with the back of his hand. He picked up his torn All Might figure and cradled it gently. "I promise," he whispered to the painted hero, his voice full of quiet determination. "I promise I'll never use this power to hurt people. I'll only use it to protect. I'll find a way to be the hero I always dreamed of being. Not because I have a strong quirk, but because I have a strong heart." The wind picked up again, carrying away the last remnants of his destroyed notebook. But Izuku didn't cry for the lost pages. Instead, he looked up at the sky with new resolve burning in his green eyes. He had a quirk now. But more importantly, he had a promise to keep. 3 months later, "Izuku, dinner's ready." Izuku Midoriya called from the kitchen, her voice echoing through their small apartment. "Coming, Mom." Izuku replied, carefully setting down the pencil he'd been using to write in his new hero analysis notebook, the 5th one since the awakening of his quirk. He paused to examine his latest entry, a detailed analysis of how Endeavor's fire-based attacks could theoretically be redirected using vector manipulation, complete with diagrams showing optimal angles and force calculations. The math was getting easier each day, much to his surprise. But as he stood up from his desk, Izuku caught sight of himself in the mirror and winced. The changes weren't dramatic, not yet, but they were there. His shoulders had broadened slightly from months of careful strength training. His green eyes seemed more focused, more intense. And most notably, there was a confidence in his posture that hadn't existed before his quirk awakened. "I hope I'm not becoming someone Mom wouldn't recognize," he thought with a touch of worry. "Izuku?" Inko's voice came again, tinged with the gentle concern that had become her default tone ever since that day 3 months ago when he'd come home battered and somehow different. "Sorry, Mom. I'm coming." He hurried to the kitchen, where his mother had prepared his favorite meal, katsu curry. But as he sat down across from her, Izuku could see the questions in her eyes. The same questions she'd been too afraid to ask for months. "How was school today?" she asked carefully, studying his face for any signs of new bruises or emotional distress. "It was fine," Izuku replied honestly. And it had been fine, more than fine, actually. Ever since word had somehow spread about his quirk manifestation, the bullying had stopped almost entirely. Bakugo still glared at him from across classrooms, but there were no more after-school beatings, no more explosions aimed at his face. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt hollow. "They're not leaving me alone because they respect me," Izuku thought as he picked at his curry. "They're leaving me alone because they're afraid of me. That's not what I wanted at all." "Izuku," Inko said softly, setting down her chopsticks, "I know you've been struggling with everything that's happened. Your quirk manifesting so late, and in such a traumatic way." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I want you to know that you can talk to me about anything. Anything at all." Izuku looked up at his mother. Really looked at her. She seemed smaller somehow, more fragile. There were new worry lines around her eyes, and he suspected they were because of him. "She's afraid too," he realized with a pang of guilt. "Not afraid of me, but afraid for me. Afraid of what this power might do to me." "Mom," he said quietly, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I know this has been hard on you. My quirk, it's not exactly what we expected, is it?" Inko's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, sweetheart, I just want you to be happy. When you were younger, you were always so bright, so eager to help everyone. Lately, you seem so serious, so burdened." "'Cause I am burdened," Izuku thought. "Every day, I can feel this power growing stronger. Every day, I have to be more careful not to accidentally hurt someone with a stray thought." But instead of saying that, he squeezed his mother's hand gently. "I'm still the same person, Mom. I still want to help people. I still dream of being a hero like All Might. This quirk, it's just given me a different path to get there." "But are you happy?" Inko pressed. "Really, truly happy?" Izuku considered the question seriously. Was he happy? The honest answer was complicated. He was grateful for his quirk. It had saved his life, after all. And he was excited about the possibilities it offered for heroic work. But there was also a constant undercurrent of anxiety, a fear that one day he might lose control and hurt someone innocent. "I'm hopeful," he said finally. "I think that's the best word for it. I'm hopeful that I can learn to use this power responsibly. That I can become the kind of hero who makes people feel safe, not afraid." Inko smiled through her tears. "That's my boy. Always thinking of others first." After dinner, Izuku retreated to his room to continue his nightly routine, meditation, and control exercises that he developed through trial and error. He sat cross-legged on his bed, closing his eyes and reaching out with his quirk to sense the vectors around him. There was the gentle circulation of air from his ceiling fan, the minute vibrations of his mother moving around in the next room, the barely perceptible shift of the building settling on its foundation. Carefully, delicately, he practiced manipulating these forces on the smallest possible scale. A dust mote dancing in a new pattern, a pencil rolling 1 centimeter to the left, the trajectory of a falling hair redirected by just a few degrees. Control, he reminded himself, the word becoming a mantra. Precision, restraint. These weren't the flashy, dramatic exercises that most kids with powerful quirks probably practiced. But for Izuku, they were essential. Every night, he pushed himself to be more precise, more subtle, more gentle with his power, because he'd made a promise, and he intended to keep it. As he meditated, his mind drifted to the upcoming UA entrance exam, still 10 months away, but already dominating his thoughts. He'd been researching the school's requirements, studying past exam footage, analyzing the fighting styles of professional heroes. Most applicants would be focusing on raw power, on flashy displays that would impress the judges. But Izuku had a different strategy in mind. He wanted to demonstrate not just strength, but wisdom. Not just power, but heart. "I'll show them what it really means to be a hero," he thought as he continued his exercises. "I'll prove that having a strong quirk doesn't matter if you don't have a strong spirit to guide it." A soft knock at his door interrupted his meditation. "Come in," he called, opening his eyes. Inko peeked her head into the room, holding a cup of tea. "I thought you might like some chamomile before bed." "Thanks, Mom." He accepted the warm cup gratefully, inhaling the soothing aroma. Inko hesitated in the doorway. "Izuku, I know I don't fully understand your quirk, or what it feels like to have that kind of power. But I want you to know that I'm proud of you. The way you've handled everything, the way you've stayed true to yourself despite such a dramatic change. That takes real strength." Izuku felt his throat tighten with emotion. I love you too, Mom. After she left, he sat in the quiet darkness of his room, sipping his tea and thinking about the future. 10 months until the UA entrance exam. 10 months to refine his control, to strengthen his body, to prepare his mind for the challenges ahead. But most importantly, 10 months to prove to himself that he could be trusted with this power. I won't let it change who I am, he promised silently, the same promise he'd made every night since his quirk awakened. I won't let it make me cold or cruel or careless with other people's lives. I'll use it to protect, to save, to help. I'll use it to be a hero. 8 months later, the abandoned beach stretched out before Izuku like a graveyard of human negligence. Mountains of garbage, rusted cars, broken appliances, rotting furniture formed an artificial landscape of waste that had been accumulating for years. Most people saw Dagoba Municipal Beach Park and felt disgust or despair. Izuku saw opportunity. All right, he murmured to himself, rolling up his sleeves. Time to get to work. For the past 8 months, this beach had become his secret training ground. Not because he enjoyed hauling trash, though he'd come to find a certain meditative quality in the repetitive work, but because it provided the perfect opportunity to practice his quirk in ways that helped rather than harmed. He approached a partially buried refrigerator, its white surface now brown with rust and grime. In the early days of his training, moving something this heavy would have required using his vector manipulation at full strength, risking property damage or injury to himself. Now, he barely had to think about it. Izuku placed his hands on the refrigerator and gently extended his quirk, feeling for the vectors of force that would allow him to lift it with minimal energy expenditure. Instead of simply redirecting gravity, which would have been the brute force approach, he created a complex web of force redirections that distributed the weight across multiple vectors, making the heavy appliance feel as light as a feather. The refrigerator rose smoothly into the air, floating beside him as he walked toward the growing pile of sorted recyclables he'd been organizing. With a thought, he guided it into place among the other metal appliances, setting it down with the gentleness of a mother placing a sleeping baby in a crib. 8 months ago, I would have struggled to move a trash bag without accidentally launching it into orbit. Izuku reflected with satisfaction. Now I can juggle washing machines while eating lunch. But the physical training was only half of his beach routine. As he worked, he also practiced the mental exercises that had become just as important as the strength training. Every piece of trash he moved required him to calculate optimal force vectors in his head. Every step he took while carrying heavy loads demanded perfect balance and control. Every moment of the cleanup was an opportunity to push his precision and restraint to new levels. The real breakthrough had come about 3 months ago, when he'd realized that his quirk wasn't just about moving objects. It was about understanding and manipulating the fundamental forces that govern motion itself. Gravity, momentum, kinetic energy, friction. All of these were tools he could use to protect people and save lives. And I've barely scratched the surface, he thought as he lifted an entire car engine with one hand while sorting screws with the other. There's so much more I could learn to do. Excuse me, young man. Izuku nearly dropped the engine in surprise, spinning around to see an impossibly tall, skeletal figure standing at the edge of the beach. The man was dressed in a yellow tracksuit that hung loosely on his gaunt frame, and despite his frail appearance, there was something commanding about his presence. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir," Izuku said quickly, gently setting down the engine and bowing politely. "I know this beach is off limits, but I was just trying to clean it up. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." The man studied him with sharp blue eyes, taking in the impressive progress Izuku had made in clearing the beach. Where there had once been solid walls of garbage, there were now clear pathways and organized piles of sorted materials. "Trouble?" the man said, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "My boy, what you're doing here is the opposite of trouble. This is..." He paused, seemingly searching for the right word. "This is heroic." Izuku felt his cheeks flush. "It's really nothing special, sir. I just thought someone should try to clean this place up." "Nothing special?" The man stepped closer, and Izuku noticed that despite his frail appearance, he moved with the unconscious confidence of someone accustomed to being the strongest person in any room. "Young man, do you have any idea how long this beach has looked like this? How many people have walked past it every day, seeing the problem but doing nothing about it?" Izuku wasn't sure how to respond to that. "And yet here you are," the man continued, "spending your own time and energy to solve a problem that isn't even your responsibility. Not for money, not for recognition, but simply because it's the right thing to do." He smiled wider. "That, my boy, is the very essence of heroism." Something about the way the man spoke with such conviction, such understanding of what heroism really meant, made Izuku look at him more carefully. There was something familiar about him, though he couldn't place what it was. Are you Are you a hero, sir? Izuku asked hesitantly. The man's smile faltered slightly. I was, once upon a time. He shook his head, seemingly pushing away unpleasant memories. But enough about me. I'm more interested in you, young man. That was quite impressive, what you did with that engine just now. Izuku's blood ran cold. Had the man seen him using his quirk? He'd been so focused on his work that he hadn't noticed anyone approaching. I'm not sure what you mean, he said carefully. Peace, young man. I'm not here to cause trouble for you. The man held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. I'm just curious about your quirk. Vector manipulation. Unless I'm mistaken, there was no point in denying it now. Yes, sir. Though I'm still learning to control it properly. Learning to control it? The man looked around at the precisely organized piles of materials, the careful placement of heavy objects, the obvious evidence of tremendous power used with surgical precision. My boy, if this is you still learning, then I'd say you're going to be quite formidable once you've mastered it. I hope not, Izuku said quietly. The man raised an eyebrow. You hope not? Izuku looked down at his hands, watching small dust particles unconsciously orbit around his fingers. I don't want to be formidable, sir. I want to be helpful. There's a difference. For a long moment, the man said nothing. Then, to Izuku's surprise, he began to laugh, not mockingly, but with genuine delight. Remarkable, he said, wiping tears from his eyes. Absolutely remarkable. Here you are, with a quirk that could level city blocks, and your greatest concern is that you might become too powerful to be gentle. Is that funny? Izuku asked, confused. Funny? No, my boy. It's beautiful. The man's expression grew serious. Do you know what separates true heroes from mere vigilantes or villains? It's not their quirks or their fighting ability or even their popularity. It's their hearts. It's their unwavering commitment to protect others, even at cost to themselves. He gestured toward the clean sections of beach. What you've done here, this shows me that you have the heart of a true hero. And with a quirk like yours, guided by a heart like that. He smiled. Well, let's just say I think you're going to do great things. Thank you, sir, Izuku said, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with his quirk. That means a lot to me. Tell me, young man, what's your name? Izuku Midoriya, sir. Well, Izuku Midoriya, I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again soon. The man turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and one piece of advice, don't be afraid of your own strength. The world needs heroes who can be both powerful and kind. You might be surprised how rare that combination really is. As the mysterious man walked away, Izuku found himself staring after him with a mixture of confusion and inspiration. There had been something almost otherworldly about their conversation, as if fate itself had guided the stranger to this beach at this exact moment. Don't be afraid of your own strength, Izuku repeated to himself. The world needs heroes who can be both powerful and kind. He looked around at the beach, at the progress he'd made, the careful organization, the evidence of power used with restraint and purpose. For the first time in months, he felt truly confident about his decision to pursue heroism. 2 months until the UA entrance exam, he thought, clenching his fists with determination. Time to show the world what a real hero looks like. As if responding to his emotions, small objects around him began to orbit slowly, not chaotically, but in perfect, controlled patterns that spoke of mastery rather than instability. Izuku smiled and got back to work. The day of the UA entrance exam, Izuku stood before the towering gates of UA High School, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. Around him, hundreds of other aspiring heroes milled about, their nervous energy crackling in the morning air like static electricity before a storm. This is it, he thought, adjusting the straps of his backpack for the dozenth time. Everything I've worked for comes down to today. 10 months of training. 10 months of meditation and control exercises. 10 months of cleaning Dagoba Beach while secretly preparing for this moment. It all led here to these imposing gates and the future that waited beyond them. Whoa, that's a big building, someone exclaimed nearby. I hear the acceptance rate is less than 1%. Another voice added nervously. My quirk better be enough to get me in. Izuku tuned out the chatter, focusing instead on his breathing and the gentle sensation of his quirk humming beneath his skin. He'd learned to keep it at a low, constant level, just enough to maintain perfect balance and posture, but not enough to accidentally affect anything around him. Control, he reminded himself, the word that had become his personal mantra. Precision. Restraint. Hey you! A sharp voice cut through his meditation, and Izuku looked up to see a tall boy with dark hair and glasses striding toward him with obvious disapproval written across his face. You've been muttering under your breath for the past 5 minutes, the boy said, his arm movements sharp and robotic. Such behavior is highly inappropriate and distracting to your fellow examinees. If you're too nervous to maintain proper decorum, perhaps you should reconsider whether you're truly ready for UA. Izuku blinked in surprise. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was muttering. I was just trying to stay focused. Focused. The boy adjusted his glasses with mechanical precision. On what exactly? The exam hasn't even begun yet. On not accidentally hurting anyone, Izuku replied honestly. The boy's expression shifted from annoyance to confusion. Excuse me, before Izuku could explain, a new voice interrupted their conversation. Whoa, this place is huge. Both boys turned to see a girl with short brown hair jogging toward the gates. Her cheeks flushed from running. She was probably pretty, Izuku noted absently, though he was more concerned with the way she was swaying slightly on her feet, as if she's going to trip. The realization hit him at the same moment the girl's foot caught on an uneven piece of pavement. Time seemed to slow as she pitched forward, her arms windmilling desperately as gravity pulled her toward an embarrassing and potentially painful faceplant. Without thinking, Izuku reached out with his quirk. But instead of stopping her fall with brute force, which might have injured her or drawn unwanted attention, he did something far more subtle. He gently redirected the vectors of her momentum, turning her forward tumble into a graceful pirouette that brought her back to her feet as if the near fall had been an intentional dance move. The girl blinked in confusion, looking around as if trying to figure out what had just happened. Ha! I could have sworn I was about to eat pavement there. Are you all right? Izuku asked, stepping forward with genuine concern. Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks for asking. She flashed him a bright smile. I'm Ochako Uraraka, by the way. Nice to meet you. Izuku Midoriya, he replied, returning her smile. And this is? He gestured toward the tall boy with glasses. Tenya Ida, the boy supplied, though he was staring at Izuku with a strange expression. I believe I owe you an apology, Midoriya. I misjudged your character based on superficial observations. That was most ungentlemanly of me. It's okay, Izuku assured him. I know I can seem a little intense sometimes. My quirk requires a lot of concentration, so I've gotten into the habit of being very focused. Your quirk? Uraraka asked curiously. What can you do? Izuku hesitated. How did you explain vector manipulation to someone in a way that didn't sound terrifying? I can manipulate the direction and magnitude of forces, he said carefully. It's useful for moving things around, or redirecting attacks, or, he gestured vaguely, helping people keep their balance. Uraraka's eyes widened as she realized what he'd done for her. Wait, you mean you? That was you who kept me from faceplanting. I just gave you a tiny nudge in the right direction, Izuku said modestly. You would have caught yourself anyway. That's incredible, Uraraka exclaimed. And so thoughtful. Most people would have just watched me fall and laughed. Before Izuku could respond, a booming voice echoed across the courtyard. What's up, UA candidates? Thanks for tuning in to me. I'm here to present the guidelines for your practical exam. Present Mike stood on a raised platform, his blonde hair spiked dramatically as he addressed the crowd through a microphone that seemed entirely unnecessary given his naturally loud voice. Are you ready? He shouted, pausing for a response that never came from the nervous crowd. I said, are you ready? Still silence. Tough crowd. Present Mike laughed, seemingly unbothered by the lack of response. All right, let's get down to business. The crowd was ushered into a massive auditorium where Present Mike explained the rules of the practical exam. Robot villains worth different point values would be scattered throughout a mock cityscape. The examinees would have 10 minutes to destroy as many robots as possible and rack up points. And one more thing, Present Mike added as images of the different robot types appeared on the screen behind him. In each battle center, there's a special obstacle that's worth 0 points. I recommend just avoiding it. As Present Mike continued his explanation, Izuku found himself studying the robot designs with analytical interest. The 1-point robots looked fast but fragile. The 2-point robots were more heavily armored but moved slowly. The 3-point robots seemed to be a balance between speed and durability. But what about the 0-point robot? He wondered. Why would they include an obstacle that's worth nothing? Unless his train of thought was interrupted by a commotion several rows behind him. A boy with spiky blonde hair was arguing loudly with the proctors. This is bullshit, the boy who Izuku recognized with a sinking heart as Katsuki Bakugo was shouting. Why is Deku even here? He's just a useless. Quiet in the audience. Present Mick's voice boomed, cutting off Bakugo's rant. We've got a show to run here. Izuku slumped in his seat, feeling the familiar weight of shame settling on his shoulders. Even here, even now, Bakugo's words had the power to make him feel small and worthless. No, he told himself firmly. I'm not that scared little boy anymore. I have a quirk now. I have a chance to prove myself. More importantly, he had a promise to keep. Battle Center be stretched out before Izuku like a miniature city, complete with streets, buildings, and, according to the briefing, an unknown number of robot villains waiting to be defeated. He stood at the starting line with roughly 40 other examinees, each one radiating nervous energy and determination. 10 minutes, he thought, rolling his shoulders and feeling his quirk respond to his mental preparations. 10 minutes to prove I belong here. Begin! Present Mick's voice boomed from speakers positioned around the mock city. Immediately, the other examinees surged forward like a human stampede, quirks activating in flashes of light and displays of power. Izuku, however, hung back for just a moment, using his quirk to sense the distribution of forces throughout the battle center. There, he realized, detecting the distinctive electromagnetic signatures of the robot villains. 12 one-pointers scattered throughout the southern district, 8 two-pointers concentrated near the central plaza, and 4 three-pointers positioned at key intersections. But there was something else, a massive electromagnetic disturbance lurking somewhere in the northern section of the city. The 0-point robot, most likely. I should avoid that area, he thought, then immediately shook his head. No. If it's there, there's a reason. UA doesn't do anything without purpose. Instead of rushing toward the nearest cluster of robots like the other examinees, Izuku took a more methodical approach. He used his quirk to launch himself onto the roof of a nearby building, gaining a bird's-eye view of the battlefield below. From his elevated position, he could see the chaos unfolding throughout the mock city. Explosions lit up the southern district as someone, probably Bakugo, tore through the one-point robots with characteristic subtlety. Ice was spreading across the central plaza, likely from another powerful quirk user. And in the distance, he could hear the distinctive whir of mechanical limbs as robots engaged with examinees. Focus, Izuku reminded himself. This isn't about getting the highest score. It's about proving I can be a hero. He spotted his first target, a 2-point robot that had cornered a girl with pink skin near an alley entrance. The robot's arm was raised to strike, and the girl looked frozen with fear. Without hesitation, Izuku leaped from the building. As he fell, he used his quirk to redirect his momentum, turning what should have been a painful drop into a controlled glide that brought him down directly behind the robot. Before the mechanical villain could react, Izuku placed his hands on its back and sent a precisely calculated force vector through its internal structure. The robot didn't explode or shatter dramatically. Instead, it simply stopped. Every joint locked up simultaneously as conflicting force vectors canceled out its motor functions, turning it into an expensive metal statue. "Are you okay?" Izuku asked the pink-skinned girl, offering her his hand. "Why, yes," she stammered, accepting his help to stand. "Thank you so much. That thing was about to squash me like a bug." "Just be careful," Izuku advised. "Stay near the edges of the battle zone if you can." The robots seemed to be concentrated toward the center. Before the girl could respond, Izuku was already moving again, using his quirk to propel himself toward the next closest robot. His strategy was becoming clear. Instead of hunting for points, he was systematically clearing threats away from other examinees who seemed to be struggling. A 1-point robot was chasing a boy who could only turn his hair into steel needles, useful but not particularly effective against armored enemies. Izuku intercepted the robot by redirecting its momentum vector, sending it careening harmlessly into a wall where it crumpled like an aluminum can. 2 3-point robots had teamed up to corner a group of examinees in a dead-end alley. Izuku dropped down between them and the students, then used his quirk to create a complex web of force redirections that turned the robots' own attacks against each other. Within seconds, both mechanical villains had been reduced to scrap metal by their own weaponry. "Holy crap!" one of the trapped students breathed. "How did you do that?" But Izuku was already moving on to the next rescue, the next opportunity to help rather than simply accumulate points. This is what being a hero feels like, he realized as he used his quirk to gently deflect debris away from a boy who'd been knocked down by a robot's energy blast. Not the point total, not the glory, just the chance to help people who need it. "Halfway point," Present Mick's voice echoed across the battle center. 5 minutes remaining. Izuku paused on a rooftop to catch his breath and survey the battlefield. In 5 minutes, he'd neutralized 6 robots and helped countless other examinees, but his official point total was probably pathetic compared to other test takers. I should go after some robots for myself, he thought. I need at least some points to pass the written portion of the evaluation. He was about to jump down to engage a nearby cluster of one-point robots when a sound made his blood run cold. A sound like a building-sized motor grinding to life. The 0-point robot was moving. Izuku spun toward the northern section of the city just in time to see a mechanical giant the size of a skyscraper rising above the buildings. It was easily 50 meters tall, with glowing red eyes and arms that could probably crush a city block. Most terrifyingly, it was moving toward the densest concentration of examinees. That's not an obstacle, Izuku realized with growing horror. That's a test. Not of our fighting ability, of our heroic instincts, because heroes didn't run from overwhelming threats. They ran toward them, but as the giant robot began its march toward the central plaza, Izuku spotted something that made his heart skip a beat. A familiar brown-haired girl, Uraraka, was trapped beneath a piece of debris in the robot's path. She was struggling to free herself, but one of her legs appeared to be pinned. She wasn't going to get clear in time. I could run, Izuku thought, his mind calculating vectors and trajectories with mechanical precision. I could use my quirk to get to safety, maybe help a few other people escape. That would be the smart thing to do. But as he watched Uraraka desperately trying to lift the concrete beam that had her trapped, he heard All Might's voice echoing in his memory. A true hero isn't someone who never falls down. It's someone who always gets back up, no matter how many times they're knocked down. And suddenly, the choice wasn't a choice at all. Izuku launched himself from the rooftop, using his quirk to accelerate his movement far beyond what should have been humanly possible. He became a green blur streaking through the air, his path calculated to intercept the 0-point robot before it could reach Uraraka. I can't destroy it, Izuku realized midair, his heart pounding. It doesn't matter. Heroes don't always need to win, they just need to stand between danger and the people they're protecting. The robot's massive fist was already swinging down toward the section of rubble where Uraraka was trapped. In seconds, she would be crushed beneath tons of metal and concrete. Izuku reached out with his quirk. Not gently this time, not with the restraint and precision he'd practiced for months. This time, he opened the floodgates and let his power flow at full strength. Every vector within a 100-meter radius suddenly bent to his will. The robot's downward strike was redirected upward. Its forward momentum was reversed, sending it staggering backward. The debris around Uraraka was lifted and gently set aside, freeing her from the trap. And Izuku himself, caught in the backwash of his own redirected forces, was thrown backward through the air like a leaf in a hurricane. Worth it, he thought as he tumbled through the sky, watching Uraraka scramble to safety below. Totally worth it. He was preparing to use his quirk to cushion his landing when he felt something soft and squishy catch him. Looking down, he saw that Uraraka had used her zero-gravity quirk to stop his fall, leaving him floating gently in midair. "Thank you," she called up to him, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you so much," but Izuku barely heard her, because as he hung suspended in the air, watching the 0-point robot stumble away from the plaza, he realized something profound had just happened. For the first time since his quirk awakened, he had used its full power without restraint. And instead of hurting people, instead of becoming the monster he'd always feared he might become, he had saved someone. He had been a hero. "Time's up." Present Mick's voice boomed across the battlefield. As Uraraka gently lowered him to the ground, Izuku found himself surrounded by other examinees. People he'd helped throughout the exam. People who'd witnessed his final desperate charge to save a fellow student. "That was incredible," someone whispered. "He stopped the 0-pointer with one hit," another voice added in awe. "Did you see how he redirected its attack? I've never seen anything like that." But Izuku barely heard the praise. He was too busy looking around at all the faces that showed admiration rather than fear, gratitude rather than terror. "They're not afraid of me," he realized with wonder. "They're inspired." As the examinees began to file out of the battle center, Izuku caught sight of a familiar skeletal figure watching from the observation deck high above. The mysterious man from the beach, the one who told him not to be afraid of his own strength. The man raised his hand in what might have been a salute, and Izuku could have sworn he saw him mouth the words, "Well done." Standing breathless among the ruins of Battle Center B, surrounded by people whose lives he'd touched, Izuku finally allowed himself to believe what he'd been hoping for months. "I can do this," he whispered to himself, his voice carrying a conviction that hadn't been there 10 months ago. "I can be a hero." 1 week later, Izuku sat at his desk in his childhood bedroom, staring at the envelope that had arrived that morning. The UA logo was embossed on the front in gold, and his name was written in elegant script across the center. This is it, he thought, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for the letter. My entire future is in this envelope. For 7 days, he tried not to think about the exam. He returned to his training routine at Dagoba Beach, thrown himself into his hero analysis notebooks, and attempted to maintain the meditation schedule that had become such an important part of his daily life. But through it all, one question had haunted him. Had he done enough? His official point total had been modest, only 18 villain points from the robots he'd personally defeated. Other examinees had undoubtedly scored much higher through pure combat prowess. But that's not what being a hero is about, he reminded himself as he carefully opened the envelope. Heroes don't just fight villains. They save people. Inside the envelope was not just a letter, but a small device that projected a hologram as soon as he touched it. To his surprise, the figure that appeared wasn't a UA administrator or teacher. It was All Might, but not the All Might he knew from posters and videos. This was a different version, leaner, more tired-looking, but somehow more real. Greetings, young Midoriya, the holographic All Might said with his characteristic broad smile. I am here to deliver your exam results. Izuku's breath caught in his throat. All Might was delivering his results personally? That could be either the best sign possible or the worst. First, let me address your villain point total. All Might continued. 18 points, a respectable score, but not quite enough to guarantee admission based on combat performance alone. Izuku's heart sank. He'd known his point total was low, but hearing it confirmed by All Might himself made it feel final. However, All Might's smile grew even broader. There was another factor in this exam that you were not told about. Rescue points awarded for heroic acts that saved your fellow examinees. A new display appeared beside All Might, showing a detailed breakdown of Izuku's performance throughout the exam. Assisting Uraraka when she nearly fell, 5 rescue points. Saving the pink-skinned student from a 2-pointer, 10 rescue points. Protecting the steel-hair student from a 1-pointer, 8 rescue points. Clearing robots away from trapped examinees, 15 rescue points. And finally, the display zoomed in on the climactic moment when Izuku had redirected the 0-point robot. Your final act, sacrificing your own safety to save Uraraka from the 0-pointer, 60 rescue points. For a total rescue score of 98 points, Izuku stared at the numbers in disbelief. 98 rescue points? That was more than 5 times his villain point total. Young Midoriya, All Might said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. In all my years of heroic work, I have rarely seen such a perfect embodiment of what it means to be a true hero. You could have focused solely on accumulating points for yourself. Instead, you chose to prioritize the safety and well-being of others, even when it disadvantaged you personally. The hologram leaned forward, and for a moment, Izuku felt as if All Might was speaking directly to him. That is the mark of a true hero. Not the strength of your quirk, not your ability to defeat villains, but the strength of your heart and your unwavering commitment to protecting others. All Might straightened up, his smile returning to full brightness. Welcome to UA Academy, young Midoriya. Your total score of 116 points places you in the top 10% of accepted students. The hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving Izuku alone in his room with a formal acceptance letter and a heart full of emotions he couldn't quite name. I did it, he thought, tears streaming down his face. I actually did it. But more than just gaining admission to UA, he had proved something to himself. He had used his quirk, his terrifying, overwhelming quirk, to help people rather than hurt them. He had faced his greatest fear and emerged not as a monster, but as a hero. Izuku, his mother's voice called from the hallway. Is everything all right? I heard you crying. I'm fine, Mom, he called back, wiping his eyes and trying to compose himself. Actually, I'm better than fine. He stood up from his desk, feeling taller somehow, more confident. Tomorrow he would start preparing for his first day at UA. He would train harder, study more, and continue developing his control over his quirk. But tonight, he allowed himself to simply enjoy the moment. He was going to be a hero, not because he had a powerful quirk, not because he'd scored high on a test, but because he'd proven that his heart was strong enough to guide his power responsibly. 10 months ago, I awakened a quirk that could destroy buildings. He reflected as he looked out his window at the city lights below. Tonight, I've proven that I can use that power to protect the people in those buildings instead. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear sirens, emergency responders heading to help someone in need. Soon, he would be able to answer those calls himself. Soon, he would be the one running toward danger to protect others. Soon, he would be a hero. As he prepared for bed, Izuku made one final entry in his hero analysis notebook. Day 304 since Quirk awakening. Accepted to UA Academy. Rescue points, 98. Most important lesson learned. True strength isn't about having the power to destroy. It's about having the wisdom and compassion to protect. The journey to becoming a hero isn't about becoming stronger. It's about becoming better. He closed the notebook and smiled. Tomorrow, the real work begins. And that's a wrap for part 1 of What If Deku Had Vector Manipulation. If this story sparked something in you, if you felt the heart, the struggle, and the rise of a new kind of hero, smash that like button and help us hit our 150 like goal to unlock part 2. Let me know in the comments, how do you think this power will shape his future? And if you haven't already, subscribe and join the ChronoCrew Legends, where we don't just watch stories, we rewrite them. Until next time, stay powerful, stay hopeful, and ride the timeline, Legends.